Kali explained. The ultimate guide to the goddess of destruction and terrifying liberation. Look into the void. Look into the starless abyss that existed before time, before light, before thought itself. In that primordial darkness, that womb of all potential, there stirs a presence. A power so ancient it defies comprehension, so terrifying it has been mistaken for a demon, and so liberating it has been worshipped as the ultimate mother. She wears a garland of severed heads. Her skirt is woven from dismembered arms. Her skin is the color of a storm cloud at midnight, and her tongue, red with blood, lolls from a mouth that seems to contain the roar of a dying universe. This is Kali. To the uninitiated eye, she is the archetype of horror, a nightmare given divine form. Western explorers, colonial officers, and Hollywood producers have often cast her as a ghoulish patron of death cults, a bloodthirsty deity demanding human sacrifice. But to peer into the heart of Hindu cosmology is to understand that this image, while terrifying, is a profound and necessary illusion. For Kali is not a goddess of simple, malevolent destruction. She is the goddess of dissolution. She is the fierce compassion that destroys ignorance. She is the terrifying grace that severs the bonds of ego. She is the ultimate reality that consumes all things, only to reveal the eternal, unchanging truth that lies beneath. Today we journey into the heart of the storm. We will confront the tales of blood and fury, decode the terrifying symbolism, and seek to understand the awesome, paradoxical truth of the Dark Mother. This is not a story for the faint of heart. It is a story of cosmic battles, existential dread, and the terrifying, beautiful liberation that can only be found in the arms of death itself. Welcome, seekers of forbidden lore, to the Eldritch Codex. Today we explain Kali. Before we delve into the epic myths of her birth, before we witness the cosmic battles that tore the heavens asunder, we must first learn to see. We must confront her image. For in the sacred traditions of Hinduism, iconography is not mere art. It is not simply a depiction. It is theology made manifest. It is a divine equation written in the language of form and posture. Every detail of Kali's terrifying visage is a chapter in a sacred text, a profound philosophical treatise encoded in symbol. To understand her, we must first learn to read her. So let us begin. Let us step into the sanctum and gaze upon the form of the Dark Mother. Our journey into this divine anatomy starts with the most overwhelming feature, the one that defines her very essence, her color. She is Shyama, the Dark One. Her skin is depicted as black or a deep, stormy blue, the color of a moonless midnight. To the uninitiated mind, a mind conditioned by Western dualism, black is the color of absence, of evil, of the sinister. But here in this ancient cosmology you must unlearn that assumption. Kali's blackness is not the blackness of negation. It is the blackness of utter, infinite potential. It is the color of the starless abyss before the Big Bang. It is the fathomless depth of the primordial ocean. It is the fertile, silent darkness of the womb from which all creation emerges. In the highest philosophical truths of the Vedanta, this is the color of Nirguna Brahman's ultimate reality, so vast and all-encompassing that it is beyond all attributes, all qualities, all colors, all forms. Just as all the colors of the spectrum, all the light in the universe, are absorbed and dissolve into pure black, so too do all names and forms, all beings, all worlds, all of time itself, dissolve back into her. She is the canvas upon which the universe is painted, and when the cosmic masterpiece is complete, she is the void into which it will be withdrawn. Her blackness is the ultimate statement of her supremacy. She is formless, yet she contains all forms. She is everything and she is nothing. Look now at her face if you dare. It is a canvas of divine contradiction. Her three eyes, for she sees the past, the present, and the future, are often depicted as red, blazing with an unholy fire. They are wide with Raudra, a divine and terrifying fury. Yet, look deeper. Past the fire you will find an ocean of karuna, of infinite compassion. This is not the petty, selfish anger of a human being. This is the righteous, protective rage of the Universal Mother. It is the fury she unleashes against the forces of ignorance, ego, and cruelty, the forces that threaten her children and the cosmic order, the eternal Dharma. She looks upon the world with the eyes of a mother who would burn the universe to the ground to protect her child. She is most often shown with 4 arms, a symbol of her dominion over all directions of space and all spheres of existence. Her power is absolute and all-pervading. Each hand holds a key to her nature. In her upper left hand she wields a sword. In Sanskrit it is the khadga. Its curved blade gleams with a dark light. The immediate impression is of slaughter, of a weapon meant for war and death. And it is a weapon of death, but not the death of the body. This is the sword of jnana, of divine, discriminating knowledge. This is the blade of ultimate discernment that slices through the densest fog of our existence. It cuts the ropes of attachment. It severs the chains of desire. It mercilessly hacks away at the tangled jungle of ignorance and illusion, which in Hindu thought is known as Maya. With this sword, she performs the ultimate spiritual surgery, cutting free the soul from the prison of the ego. It is the weapon that liberates you from the painful, endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth known as samsara, granting the ultimate freedom, moksha. To receive its touch is terrifying, but it is an act of profound grace. In her lower left hand she holds its trophy, a freshly severed head, gripped by the hair dripping with blood. This is arguably her most misunderstood and shocking symbol. It is the emblem that led colonial observers to label her a demoness of death cults. But they were looking with mundane eyes. Esoterically, the head is not that of some random demon vanquished in a forgotten war. It is our head. It is your ego. It is the limited, fragile, self-important identity that you call I or me. It is the constant chatter of the mind, the pride, the fear, the ambition, all that separates you from the infinite. Kali holds it up to show us what must be sacrificed at the altar of truth. The blood that drips from it is not merely gore. It is the prana, the life force, the volatile passions and energies that, once offered to her, are purified and returned to their divine source. She shows us plainly, true spiritual life only begins after the death of the limited self. But this vision of terror is not the complete picture. Look to her right hands. They tell a different story. Her upper right hand is raised in the Abhya Mudra, the gesture that says, "Fear not." Consider the breathtaking, stunning paradox of this. The most terrifying form in the entire divine pantheon, a being adorned with death and brandishing weapons of dissolution, is looking you directly in the eye and commanding you to be free of fear. Why? Because she is the embodiment of fear itself. Once you have faced her, once you have truly confronted the reality of death, destruction, and your own annihilation, what is there left to be afraid of? She is the ultimate fear, and by facing her, you transcend all lesser fears. It is a promise of absolute protection. Her lower right hand is extended downwards in the Varada Mudra, the gesture of granting boons, of bestowing gifts and blessings. She who takes everything, your identity, your attachments, your very world, is also the one who gives everything. And her greatest boon is not worldly wealth or power, but the ultimate, priceless gift she has already been offering, liberation. The terrifying freedom of the void. Her adornments continue the story of cosmic truth. Around her neck, she wears a garland of 50 severed heads, the Mundamala. They are not random trophies of a bloody conquest. They are a profound symbol of knowledge and creation. These 50 heads represent the 50 letters of the Sanskrit alphabet, the sacred phonemes, the building blocks of all language, all mantras, all sacred hymns, and thus, all manifested reality. Language is what creates our world, what separates one thing from another. By wearing the alphabet as the necklace, Kali demonstrates that she is the source of all creation, the origin of the word, the Shabda Brahman. Yet, because they are severed, she also demonstrates that she is beyond them. She is not bound by the reality that she creates. She is the ultimate, silent truth that exists before the first sound is ever uttered. Her girdle, the skirt that covers her nakedness, is woven from severed human arms. These arms represent karma, the universal law of cause and effect, the web of actions that binds every soul to the wheel of samsara. Our actions, our deeds, propel us from one life to the next in an endless cycle. Kali wears these arms as a belt, signifying her absolute mastery over this law. She is the one who can untangle the karmic knots of her devotees. By surrendering the fruits of your actions to her, you are freed from their consequences. She literally wears the burden of your karma, liberating you from its weight. And then there is her tongue. It lolls from her cavernous mouth, impossibly long, stained blood red. This potent symbol holds multiple layers of meaning. In one sense, it represents her insatiable hunger. She is the all-devouring reality, the divine consumer who thirsts for the blood of demons, which esoterically are our own inner vices. Lust, anger, greed, envy, and pride. She lovingly licks them clean from our souls. But in the context of her most famous myth, which we will soon explore, her extended tongue is a sign of shock and divine astonishment. It is a sudden break, a moment of awareness that halts her destructive dance. It is a symbol that even this most primal, untamable force is ultimately part of a greater cosmic balance. Finally, we arrive at the foundation of her entire image, the most profound theological statement in all of Tantra. Kali is almost always depicted standing, or more accurately dancing, upon the prone, serene, and seemingly lifeless body of her consort, the great god Shiva. To the uninitiated, this looks like an act of domination, a victory over a male god. This is a profound misreading. Here lies the ultimate secret of non-dual reality. In this cosmic tableau, Shiva represents Purusha, or pure, static, undifferentiated consciousness. He is the absolute, the unmoving, the eternal witness. He is pure being, silent and inert. Kali, in contrast, is Prakriti or Shakti. She is energy, power, movement, and manifestation. She is the dynamic, kinetic force of the universe. She is the cosmic dance of creation, preservation, and destruction. He is the canvas, she is the paint. He is the stillness, she is the dance. He is the potential, she is the expression. And here is the crucial truth. They are inseparable. Without Kali's energy, her Shakti, Shiva is but a corpse or Shava. The I in Shiva's name represents the activating energy of Shakti. Without it, he is lifeless. He has consciousness but no power to act. He is inert, unable to create or experience. Conversely, without the grounding foundation of Shiva's consciousness, Kali's energy is blind, chaotic, and aimless, a mindless destructive force, as we shall see in her myth. Together they are not two but one. They are the two aspects of the singular ultimate reality, consciousness and energy, being and becoming, locked in an eternal, terrifying, and beautiful embrace. So, to gaze upon Kali is not to see a monster. It is to see a map of the universe and a diagram of your own soul. It is to look upon the face of reality itself, in all its terrifying, beautiful, and liberating totality. It is a challenge from the divine, an invitation written in blood and bone. Can you love a God who promises not comfort, but annihilation? Can you find ultimate refuge in the very force that will unmake your world? This is the central question of Kali, and its answer lies not just in her image, but in the story of her apocalyptic birth. Our story begins, as such stories often do, in an age of cosmic despair. The celestial symphony had fallen out of tune. The fundamental harmony of the universe, the sacred law known as Dharma, had been shattered. A shadow had fallen across the three-world, the heavens, the earth, and the netherworld sand. This shadow had a name. Two names, in fact. Shamba and Nishamba. These were not ordinary demons. They were asuras of immense power and ambition, brothers bound by an unholy pact to conquer all of existence. Through a campaign of asceticism so severe it scorched the heavens with its intensity, through years of arduous penance that bent the will of the cosmos, they had cornered the creator god, Brahma, and extracted from him a boon. The boon was simple in its wording and devastating in its implication. They could not be killed by any male. Not by God, not by man, not by beast, not by any being designated male in the grand ledger of creation. Drunk on their newfound, near-perfect invincibility, they unleashed a war that shook the foundations of reality. Their demonic legions, a tide of monstrous forms and insatiable hatred, stormed the celestial capital of Amaravati. They cast out the Devas, the luminous gods of the Hindu pantheon. Indra, the king of the gods and wielder of the thunderbolt, was humbled. Agni, the god of fire whose flames were the very mouth of the divine, was extinguished. Vayu, the god of the wind, was rendered breathless. The sun and moon were enslaved, forced to light the halls of the Asura kings. The cosmic order collapsed into a brutal tyranny. The sacred hymns of the Vedas fell silent, for there was no one left in the heavens to hear them. The sacrificial fires on earth grew cold, for the gods to whom they were offered were now exiles. A long dark night of terror fell across creation. In their utter desperation, the defeated and fugitive gods, led by the great trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, sought the one power in the universe who existed outside the parameters of the demon's boon. They journeyed to the highest peaks of the Himalayas, to the sacred mountain where the great goddess, Parvati, dwelled in serene meditation. Parvati, the gentle, benevolent consort of Shiva, the embodiment of marital bliss and maternal grace. They stood before her, their divine forms diminished, their voices filled with the sorrow of a broken cosmos. They sang her praises, recalling her power, her compassion, her role as the mother of all. They pleaded with her, not as gods demanding aid, but as desperate children begging their mother for protection. "Oh Devi," they cried, "the universe, your creation, groans under the heel of the Asuras. Only you can save us." Parvati, the picture of serene grace, opened her eyes. She heard their pleas and her divine heart was moved by their suffering. And from within her own being, from the very sheath of her divine body, what the texts call her Koshanu form emerged. She was not born, she was revealed. A warrior goddess of breathtaking beauty and overwhelming power. She was Ambika, a name that means mother, but she is better known to the world as Durga, the unconquerable. She was a dazzling vision of divine wrath. Her skin shone like 1,000 suns. She possessed 10 arms, and into each, the gods placed their most powerful weapon. Shiva gave his trident, Vishnu his whirling discus, Indra his thunderbolt, Vayu his mighty bow. She was not just a goddess. She was the consolidated, focused, and weaponized energy of the entire pantheon. She was the divine feminine in its most magnificent warrior aspect. Durga mounted her celestial lion, a beast whose roar could shatter mountains, and she rode into battle. Her laughter, deep and resonant, echoed like thunder across the demonic battle lines, a sound of both joy and doom. She was an army unto herself, a maelstrom of divine fury. She annihilated the vast hordes of Shamba and Nishamba, felling their greatest generals, Chanda and Munda, with contemptuous ease. The tide of the war turned. Hope, for the first time in ages, was rekindled in the hearts of the gods. But Shamba and Nishamba, watching their empire of evil crumble, unleashed their final, most horrific weapon. A general whose very biology was a curse upon the battlefield. His name was Raktabija. The name itself is a key. Rakta means blood. Bija means seed. He was the blood seed. And his boon was a nightmare of exponential warfare. Every single drop of his blood that touched the sacred earth would not merely stain the ground. It would instantly spring to life, giving birth to a new, fully formed, and equally powerful clone of himself. Durga, the unconquerable, charged him. She fought with the fury of a cornered galaxy. She pierced his flesh with her spear, and 1,000 new Raktabijas erupted from the bloody soil. She slashed him with her sword, and a legion of clones rose from the scarlet spray. Her every victory was a catastrophic defeat. For each wound she inflicted, she multiplied her enemy. The battlefield, once filled with the finite army, was transforming before her eyes into a swarming, regenerating, cancerous ocean of demonic flesh. Imagine the psychological horror of it. To fight an enemy that feeds on its own wounds. To strike and create, to kill and give birth. The very ground, the sacred Mother Earth, was being forced to give birth to her enemy. The gods watched from the heavens, their rekindled hope turning to ash. Durga, their ultimate champion, the sum of all their power, was being overwhelmed. Not by superior strength, but by a relentless, horrifying fecundity. The war was unwinnable. The very logic of combat had been inverted. It was in this moment of absolute crisis, of cosmic checkmate, that something within Durga snapped. The serene face of the warrior mother began to contort. Her golden brow furrowed into a knot of black rage. Her beautiful features hardened into a terrifying mask. Her skin, once the color of molten gold, began to darken, absorbing all light, turning the color of a thundercloud pregnant with annihilation. A terrible, primal Regian anger that predated the universe itself. An anger that was not an emotion but a fundamental force of reality began to well up from the deepest abyss of her being. And then from her third of the Ajna chakra, the eye of divine consciousness and destruction, she burst forth. She was not beautiful. She was horror personified. A skeletal, emaciated figure with cavernous, sunken eyes that burned like dying stars. Her skin was as black as the void. Her hair was a tangled, wild storm. And from a gaping, cavernous mouth, a long, blood-red tongue hung, lolling and hungry. She wore a garland of freshly severed heads and a skirt of dismembered arms. She was Kali, the raw, undiluted, unrestrained fury of the divine. She was the emergency protocol of the cosmos. She was the power you unleash when all other options have failed and you are prepared to burn down the world. Kali let out a shriek. It was not a sound that could be described in mortal terms. It was a fissure in the fabric of reality itself, a scream that tore at the laws of physics. The demon clones who had laughed at the gods and sneered at Durga's futile efforts now froze. Their demonic arrogance evaporated, replaced by a deep, instinctual, primordial terror. This was not a warrior they faced. This was an apocalypse given form. This was the end. She did not walk. She did not run. She leaped. A blur of black, a whirlwind of absolute death. But she did not repeat Durga's mistake. As her sword, the blade of dissolution, decapitated the Raktabijas one by one, she did something else. With her cavernous mouth and that impossibly long, prehensile tongue, she drank their blood. She stretched her tongue across the entire battlefield. A vast red carpet of divine hunger. She caught every drop, every spray, every torrent of the demon's cursed lifeblood before it could touch the earth. She was a living void, a black hole of thirst. She devoured him. She consumed his clones. She consumed his very essence. The horrifying tide of demonic regeneration was swallowed into her divine form. The endless army withered and vanished into her singular, terrifying being. Finally, she cornered the original Raktabija, the source of the plague. She lopped off his head in a single, fluid motion and, tilting her head back, drank the last of his lifeblood directly from the stump of his neck, ensuring that not a single seed of his evil would ever sprout again. The threat was over. Raktabija was gone, not just killed, but utterly cosmically erased. The gods in the heavens roared in triumph and relief. The universe was saved. But as they looked down from their celestial balconies, their celebration died in their throats, replaced by a new and even greater dread. The demon was dead, but the fury that had been born to kill him was still very much alive. The demon was dead. The cosmic threat of Raktabija had been utterly and perfectly erased from existence. In the heavens, a breath of collective relief was drawn by the assembled gods. The war was won. But they were wrong. The war was not over, it had merely changed its nature. The force they had unleashed, the primordial fury they had called forth from the heart of the goddess, could not be so easily contained. The rage that had been given a target was now without one. And an engine of annihilation that cannot be switched off does not simply go idle. It seeks a new object to annihilate. The taste of blood, the ecstatic frenzy of destruction, had awakened in Kali a primal divine madness. Her purpose fulfilled, her raison d'etre vanished, her destructive energy, her Raudra, now turned upon the world itself. Having annihilated the specific enemy, her fury, now boundless and undifferentiated, began to consume everything. She began a dance. But this was no dance of celebration. This was the Tandava, the terrifying cosmic dance of absolute destruction, a symphony of ruin. Her feet, which had once been a promise of salvation, now became instruments of doom. Her footfalls were seismic events, cracking the very crust of the earth. Her wild, shrieking laughter was no longer a sound of battle joy but the sound of grinding tectonic plates, the scream of reality being torn apart. Blinded by her bloodlust, lost in the ecstasy of unmaking, she saw enemies everywhere. The ancient trees of the forest were demonic soldiers to be uprooted. The steadfast mountains were Ajura fortresses to be shattered. The rivers were serpents to be stamped into dust. She was pure, destructive power, no longer guided by discerning consciousness. She was the fire that, having burned the rot, now threatened to consume the entire forest. She was a cosmic autoimmune response, attacking the healthy body of the universe with the same ferocity with which it had attacked the disease. The surviving gods, the sages, and the celestial beings watched from above, their brief moment of triumph curdling into absolute, abject terror. The cure had become infinitely more catastrophic than the disease. They had called upon the abyss to fight their battles, and now the abyss was swallowing them whole. They had uncorked the whirlwind and now faced the utter reaping. In their utter powerlessness, they scrambled for a solution. How do you fight a hurricane? How do you reason with an earthquake? How do you plead with the concept of entropy itself? Their weapons were useless. Their hymns were unheard. Their power was a flickering candle in the face of a supernova. In desperation, their terrified gaze turned to the only being in the three worlds who could possibly quell this cosmic storm. The one being whose nature was the perfect antithesis to her chaos. Her consort. Her other half. Shiva. The great god. The supreme ascetic. The lord of dancers and the lord of yogis. Mahadeva. Shiva, observing the scene from his throne on Mount Kailash, understood. His consciousness was vast enough to comprehend what was happening. He knew this was not malice. This was not evil. This was the fundamental nature of raw, untamed Shakti. It was pure energy without a container. It was infinite power without a grounding pull of consciousness. Her dance needed to be stopped, but it could not be stopped by force. To meet her chaos with more chaos would only tear the universe apart faster. The storm could not be fought. It had to be calmed from its center. And so Shiva enacted a divine Gambitan act of ultimate surrender and ultimate power. He did not gather an army. He did not brandish his trident. Instead, he descended from his mountain peak and journeyed to the heart of the battlefield, now a desolate wasteland of Kali's making. And there amongst the corpses of demons and the wreckage of the world he lay down. He became perfectly still, utterly passive. He made himself inert, an island of absolute serenity in a raging sea of absolute chaos. He became one with the destruction, laying himself down as a willing sacrifice upon the altar of her divine madness. He became a corpse, a Shava, offering his own body as the ground for her dance. Kali, her vision clouded by blood and fury, her mind lost in the roaring bliss of annihilation, continued her rampage. She was oblivious. She danced across the mangled bodies, her feet thundering a rhythm of doom, her wild hair lashing like whips of darkness. And then it happened. In the midst of her wild, destructive stomping, her right foot landed. Not on rock, not on earth, not on the corpse of a demon. It landed squarely on the chest of her husband. In that instant, a circuit was completed. A jolt of pure consciousness shot up from the prone form of Shiva and into the kinetic fury of Kali. The touch of the static on the dynamic. The formless meeting the force. For the first time since her emergence, something pierced through her madness. She stopped. Mid-stomp. The dance, which was threatening to shatter the stars, came to a dead halt. She looked down. And she saw him, Shiva, the eternal witness, the still point of the turning world, her foundation, her beloved. A wave of profound, divine astonishment washed over her. The texts describe it as lajja, a kind of sacred shame or embarrassment. Not a petty human emotion, but a sudden, shocking return to self-awareness. A cosmic gasp of what have I done? She had let her own power, her own divine energy, carry her so far that she was on the verge of destroying the very consciousness that gave her existence meaning. She was about to destroy her own source. And in that precise moment of realization, her long, red tongue lolled out of her mouth. This was not the tongue of hunger. This was the physical expression of her shock, an involuntary gesture of utter astonishment. The earthquake ceased. The shriek died in her throat, replaced by the silence of the void. The wild, blazing fire in her eyes softened, the red of rage giving way to the deep, dark, loving gaze of the mother. The storm had passed. The apocalypse was averted. She had been brought back to herself, not by a greater force, but by the grounding, unmoving, and loving presence of consciousness. And this single powerful image, Kali, the black goddess of time and destruction, standing on the serene white body of Shiva, the god of timeless consciousness, became the most profound and central icon in all of Tantric philosophy. It is the eternal interplay of energy and awareness. Energy without awareness is blind, destructive chaos. Awareness without energy is inert, a mere corpse, powerless. The universe, and indeed our own consciousness, requires both to exist. It requires the dynamic, fearsome, world-creating, world-destroying dance of Kali, and the serene, eternal, witnessing stillness of Shiva. Life itself exists in the delicate, terrifying balance of that single, sacred step. The gods were saved. The cosmos was preserved. But an indelible lesson had been etched into the memory of the universe. The power of the Dark Mother is absolute, and to invoke her is to risk everything. She is the ultimate protector, but her protection is a fire that can burn away not just your enemies, but your very self and the world you stand on. The story of Raktabija is the myth that forges Kali in the fires of popular imagination. It is her genesis, her cataclysmic birth onto the stage of divine warfare. But to limit our understanding of her to this single apocalyptic event is like looking at a supernova and believing you have understood the entire nature of the cosmos. It is to miss the vastness of her domain. For Kali is not merely a divine weapon, a warrior goddess summoned only in the direst of circumstances. In the deeper currents of Hindu thought, she is a fundamental principle of reality itself, a cosmic constant. To truly comprehend her, we must now step beyond the blood-soaked battlefield and into the quiet, terrifying depths of theology and philosophy, where she takes on even more profound and complex roles. We must meet her many other faces. In the great traditions of Shaktism branch of Hinduism, which venerates the divine feminine, the Shakti, as the supreme and ultimate deity, the entire cosmic hierarchy is inverted. Here, Kali is not an emanation of the gentle Parvati. On the contrary, Parvati, the benevolent Durga, the opulent Lakshmi, the wise Saraswati, the goddesses of the pantheon, are but waves on her infinite ocean. They are emanations of her. In this supreme aspect, she is known as Mahakali, Great Kali. She is the primordial power, the ultimate reality that precedes even the great male gods of the Trinity. She is the darkness of the womb from which Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer are themselves born. The sacred text, the Devi Mahatmyam, paints a stunning picture of this power. Between the great cycles of universal creation, the great god Vishnu, the preserver of the cosmos, lies sleeping upon the cosmic serpent Ananta, floating on the causal ocean. He is inert, lost in a divine slumber known as Yoga Nidra. But this slumber is not his own choice. It is Mahakali in the form of the great goddess of sleep and illusion who has lulled him into this state. She is the fundamental force of entropy and dissolution that draws the universe back into a state of pure potential. It is only when the other gods praise and petition her that she agrees to withdraw. Only when she releases him from her spell can Vishnu awaken to set the next cycle of creation in motion. In this role, she is the beginning and the end. She is the womb and the tomb of universes. Her very name is a key, a direct clue to this immense cosmic role. The name Kali is the feminine form of the Sanskrit word Kala, and Kala possesses a powerful and chilling dual meaning. It means both time and blackness. Therefore, Kali is literally the goddess of time. Think of time as we experience it. A relentless linear progression, a river that carries all things from birth, through growth, to inevitable decay and death. Nothing that has a name or a form can escape its current. Empires fall, mountains erode, stars die. Kali is this inexorable, all-devouring force. She is the engine of entropy. She is the ticking clock at the heart of every atom. She is the ultimate truth that all that is born must die. When she dances, it is the universe itself moving through its ages. But here lies another of her profound paradoxes. While she is time, she is also the one who exists beyond time. She is the timeless eternal present in which the illusion of past and future occurs. By embodying and consuming time itself, she offers a path to eternity. To worship her, to meditate upon her, is to bravely confront the terrifying reality of your own mortality. It is to accept the ceaseless change and decay of the world without flinching. And in that radical acceptance, one can transcend time's grasp. She is the terrifying gateway that, once passed through, leads to the timeless, changeless state of moksha or liberation. She is the death that leads to true, immortal life. Nowhere is the radical and untamable nature of Kali more apparent than in the esoteric spiritual system known as Tantra. In the popular Western imagination, Tantra has been tragically reduced to a stylized practice of sacred sexuality. But its true scope is far grander, more dangerous, and more profound. True Tantra is a spiritual path of radical alchemy. It does not seek to renounce the world, but to engage with it directly, using the very poisons of existent desire, fear, attachment as the ingredients for the elixir of liberation. It is a path that seeks to find the divine in the material, the profane, and the forbidden. And at the beating, bloody heart of many of the most powerful tantric traditions stands Kali. Tantric practitioners, or tantrikas, actively seek out the very things that conventional society and orthodox religion tell them to shun. This is not rebellion for its own sake, it is a highly disciplined spiritual technology. They meditate in the Smashinate cremation grounds. Imagine it. Sitting for hours amidst the stench of burning flesh, surrounded by the stark, undeniable reality of death and decay. Why? Because the cremation ground is Kali's sacred garden. It is her throne room. It is the one place on earth where all the illusions of the world are burned away. Your wealth, your beauty, your status, your power, your intellectual pride all are rendered meaningless as they turn to ash and bone. To meditate there is to sit willingly in Kali's lap. It is to confront the ultimate human fear head-on and by doing so, find a profound peace that cannot be shaken by anything in the world of the living. In Tantra, Kali is the supreme guru, the ultimate teacher. Her terrifying form is a deliberate, calculated challenge. She asks the seeker a series of terrifying questions. Can you see the divine in what repulses you? Can you find love in the face of absolute terror? Can you embrace the goddess who wears your own mortality as a necklace and your karmic deeds as a skirt? Can you love a reality that includes disease, decay, and death? The tantric path with Kali involves the systematic and deliberate breaking down of every barrier the ego erects. The ego craves purity, so the tantrika meditates on the impure elements of life. The ego fears death, so the tantrika makes a home in its presence. The ego clings desperately to social conventions and identity, so the tantrika works to shatter them within their own mind. This is a path of spiritual fire. Kali is the liberator, but her liberation is terrifying. It is the liberation of a forest fire that must destroy the old, dead wood to clear the way for new, vibrant growth. It is the freedom that comes only after everything you thought you were has been utterly and completely destroyed. After these visions of cosmic annihilation and radical, taboo-breaking spirituality, it may be difficult, even impossible, to reconcile the image of the cremation ground-dwelling, blood-drinking goddess with the idea of a gentle, loving, and approachable mother. Yet, for millions upon millions of her devotees, particularly in the Bengal region of India and across the diaspora, this is precisely who she is. In her most popular and widely worshipped form, she is known as Dakshinakali. The name means the south-facing Kali, which is considered her most benevolent and gracious aspect. In this guise, her terrifying nature is softened, though never fully hidden. While she retains her dark skin, her fearsome sword, and her necklace of skulls, a crucial change is made. Her front right hand is turned fully in the Varata Mudra, the boon-granting gesture, offering blessings to all who approach. Her expression is not one of manic fury, but of deep, maternal compassion. Her right foot is placed forward on Shiva's chest, symbolizing what is known as the right-handed path, a path of devotion that is more accessible and less extreme than the radical tantric ways. This is the Kali of the household shrine. This is the Kali worshipped by the great 19th century mystic and saint, Ramakrishna Paramahansa, one of her most famous devotees. For him, she was not an abstract philosophical concept or a terrifying force. She was simply Ma, his mother. He would talk to her, laugh with her, cry to her in moments of doubt, and see her divine presence in every person and object he encountered. For him, and for countless devotees who follow this path, Kali's fearsome exterior is just a mask, a fierce disguise worn by the most compassionate and loving mother imaginable. They see her as the ultimate protector. She is the mother who will stop at nothing to ensure her child's well-being and spiritual progress. Her ferocity is not directed at her children, but at the demons both external and internal that would harm them. Worshippers come to her with the full spectrum of human needs. They pray for success in exams, for recovery from illness, for good marriage, for the strength to overcome addiction, and for the ultimate boon of spiritual liberation. They offer her red hibiscus flowers, which mirror the color of her tongue, along with sweets, incense, and the simple, profound devotion of their hearts. In return, they feel the fierce, unshakable, and unconditional love of the Divine Mother who holds the entire cosmos in her hands. This duality is the key to her mystery. She is the source of all fear and the ultimate dispeller of all fear. She is the destroyer of life and the fierce protector of her devotees. She is the ghoulish goddess of the cremation ground and the loving mother who answers a child's prayer. To understand Kali, one must learn to hold these contradictions in the mind at once, to see them not as contradictions at all, but as different, equally true facets of one all-encompassing, magnificent, and terrifying reality. A figure as potent, as primal, and as profoundly paradoxical as Kali was inevitably destined to be misunderstood. Like a star so massive it bends light, her sheer theological gravity has distorted her image as it traveled across cultural and historical divides. To gaze upon her with eyes unprepared for her complexity is to risk seeing only a monster. And the history of Kali's perception in the West is a stark and cautionary tale of how easily the most profound symbolism can be twisted into a grotesque and terrifying caricature. The primary source of this distortion is rooted in the soil of empire. When British colonial administrators arrived in India, they brought with them a rigid dualistic worldview forged in Abrahamic certainty. There was God, and there was the devil. There was good and there was evil. There was light and there was darkness. In this simplistic framework, there was no room for a goddess who was both terrifying and benevolent, both the destroyer and the loving mother. Presented with the iconography of Kali's severed heads, the skirt of arms, the blood-drenched tongue, they did not see a map of the cosmos. They saw a demon. Their search for evidence to confirm this bias led them to the infamous cult of the Thuggee. The Thuggees were a network of organized gangs, highway robbers who, for centuries, practiced a horrifyingly unique form of ritualistic murder. They would skillfully infiltrate caravans of travelers, gaining their trust over days or even weeks, before suddenly turning on them, strangling their victims with a silken cloth or a sash, often as a form of sacrifice to a version of the goddess Kali, or a similar regional deity Bhavani. For the British colonial machine, the Thuggee were a grim gift. They were the perfect villains. Here, it seemed, was proof of the inherent depravity of the native religion. The colonial administrators and the sensationalist press back in London seized upon these practices with morbid glee. They painted Hinduism itself with the Thuggee's bloody brush. The complex philosophies, the vast and varied traditions of worship, the deep devotionalism of it was ignored, flattened into a one-dimensional portrait of a bloodthirsty cult, with Kali as its chief demonic patroness. The Thuggee became a colonial obsession, a dark justification for the so-called civilizing mission of the British Empire, a convenient horror story used to legitimize colonial rule. This distorted image did not die with the empire. It was mummified and preserved in the sarcophagus of Western popular culture. It lurked in the pages of pulp novels, but it was truly cemented in the global consciousness through the power of cinema. We speak, of course, of the 1984 film Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. In that film, a global audience was introduced to a cackling, heart-ripping high priest chanting Kali Ma before a congregation of hypnotized cultists. This portrayal, while a thrilling piece of adventure fiction, presented a version of Kali worship that has almost no connection whatsoever to authentic Hindu practice or belief. It was the colonial caricature given a Hollywood budget, a ghost that continues to haunt her true identity to this day. It is therefore crucial to state this clearly and without ambiguity. The practices of the Thuggee were a fringe, criminal, and horrific aberration. They were as representative of mainstream Hinduism as the medieval witch hunts were of the core teachings of Jesus Christ. For the vast majority of her 1 billion followers today, Kali is not a goddess who demands human sacrifice. She is the goddess who demands the sacrifice of the human ego. The blood she truly desires is not ours, but the blood of our inner demons. Our rage, our greed, our ignorance, and our pride. But as the long shadow of colonialism recedes, and as the world grows more interconnected, Kali is being reclaimed and re-examined. Not just in India, but across the globe. And in our modern, frantic, and often chaotic age, her ancient and powerful symbolism has found a potent new resonance. She is speaking to us now, perhaps more clearly than ever before. For many, especially women seeking to break free from centuries of patriarchal constraint, Kali has become a powerful feminist icon. She is the divine embodiment of unapologetic, untamable feminine power. She is not demure. She is not submissive. She is not defined by her relationship to a male goat. In fact, in her most famous icon, she stands upon him, not in domination, but as the active principle of the cosmos. She embodies female rage, not as a petty or hysterical outburst, but as a righteous, world-changing, and creative force. She is the power of women to shatter oppressive structures, to destroy the patriarchy, to find their voice and speak their truth with a roar that cracks the foundations of the old world. She has also emerged as a symbol of a radical and terrifying ecological consciousness. In an age where humanity's relentless consumption threatens to unravel the planetary ecosystem, Kali's image as the all-consuming force of nature is a stark and timely warning. She is Mother Nature in her most furious and uncompromising aspect. She is the hurricane that scours the coastline clean. She is the wildfire that consumes the drought-stricken forest. She is the pandemic that sweeps through a species that has grown too arrogant. She reminds us that the earth is not a passive resource to be endlessly exploited. It is a living, powerful entity, and its destructive capacity, once fully unleashed, will be absolute and non-negotiable. She is the ultimate payback for our hubris. And finally, in a modern culture that is often paralyzed by a fear of aging and obsessed with denying the reality of death, Kali offers a path of radical acceptance. She does not offer us comforting lies or promises of eternal youth. She forces us to confront our own mortality, not as a morbid obsession, but as the essential key to living a more authentic, vibrant, and meaningful life. She teaches that it is only by embracing the reality of endings that we can truly appreciate the gift of the present moment. She is the goddess of letting go of old habits, of toxic relationships, of past traumas, of outdated beliefs, and ultimately of the very fear of death itself. Her liberation is terrifying precisely because it is so complete. It requires us to have the courage to lose everything we think we are, in order to become everything we are truly meant to be. And so we arrive at the end of our journey, having walked through cosmic fire and stared into the starless eyes of the abyss. We are left with the final, echoing question that has haunted every step of our exploration. After all the myths, all the philosophy, all the terror, and all the love, who is Kali? She is the warrior who descends from the brow of a goddess when the cosmos itself is on the brink of collapse. She is the mad dancer whose fury threatens to unmake creation, a force of nature so absolute it can only be stopped by an act of perfect surrender. She is the serene mother who halts her apocalyptic dance for love, her fury dissolving in a moment of divine recognition. She is Mahakali, great time itself, the inexorable, dark river that births all things and inevitably devours them. She is the path to timelessness, the terrifying gateway through which the soul must pass to escape the very river she commands. She is the gruesome goddess of the cremation ground who teaches her lessons in the ash and bone of worldly illusion. She is the loving mother in the temple who hears the whispered prayers of her children and protects them with a ferocity that makes demons tremble. She is a misunderstood monster, a colonial caricature born of fear and ignorance. She is a modern icon of feminine rage, of ecological warning, of radical acceptance. Kali is a paradox. She is the ultimate living, breathing contradiction. And it is in that divine contradiction that her most profound truth is found. She represents a vision of the divine that has not been sanitized for our comfort. It has not been made safe or palatable for our delicate sensibilities. She does not offer easy answers or gentle reassurances. Instead, she holds up a dark mirror to the universe as it truly is. Beautiful and brutal, creative and destructive, loving and terrifying, all at once. And in this, she teaches us the most difficult and necessary of all lessons, that destruction is not always an evil. Sometimes it is a desperate and necessary act of compassion. The sick forest must burn for new, healthy life to grow. The old, sick, and limited self must die for the enlightened self to be born. The ego, with all its pride and fear, must be decapitated for the soul to be truly free. To gaze upon the full visage of Kali is to gaze into the roaring heart of reality's great, terrifying, and beautiful secret, that life and death are not opposites. They are not enemies locked in an eternal war. They are two hands of the same goddess. They are two steps in the same eternal dance. And true liberation is not found by fleeing from the darkness. It is found by having the courage to walk directly into it, and finding the universal mother waiting for you there, with a sword of dissolution in one hand, and a gesture of blessing in the other. Fear not. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of darkness and light. The myths of our world are deep and often disquieting, but they hold the keys to understanding ourselves and the cosmos we inhabit. If you wish to continue exploring the world's most profound and mysterious lore, consider subscribing to the Eldritch Codex and activating notifications, so you never miss an expedition into the unknown. Share your thoughts on the terrifying liberation of Kali in the comments below. What other deities or cosmic entities would you like us to explain? Until next time, seekers, continue to question, continue to learn, and do not be afraid to look into the abyss. Sometimes it looks back with the eyes of a mother.